but you do realize that the things that I said in that room are, one, still protected speech, and two, there's nothing I can do if the fucking federal government wants to make an example out of me. A lot of people covered my ICE detention, but my favorite title actually came from New York Post, the dish rag of all dish rags. Okay, New York Post, that every time I get like any sort of positive coverage, will immediately write articles about how I'm a terrorist that needs to be killed or whatever. They got on and they hit one of the funniest bars on this, and I can't even deny it. Okay. Liberal loudmouth streamer hasandpiker claims he was detained by U.S. immigration officials. I respect it. I respect that. Game recognized game. They hit me hard. Okay. They hit me hard where it hurts, calling me liberal, which I think is not great. They hit me with a loudmouth. I am a loudmouth, and I respect being called that, but I do not respect being called a liberal. I don't appreciate that. I think that's crazy. But yeah, I mean, this is a good summarization of the events that took place. This is from a progressive Now This Impact TikTok account. I'll replay this real quick from yesterday. Agent goes, "Step aside, sir." I was like, here we go. All right. I'm waiting in the corner. This Latina ICE agent comes up, picks me up, takes me to this detention center. I sit down, fluorescent light bulbs, the whole nine. Okay. They have benches in the back of O'Hare Airport where there's like a detention area. Okay. There's a detention area. I'm sitting there. There's like a bunch of terrified families. Finally, this agent comes out, says, "Hasandpiker." I'm like, "That's me. Coming with me." I'm like, "Oh, brother, here we go." They take me to this back room. Okay. And the back room is not great. Everything, the back room is designed in the most hostile way I've ever been inside of a room. The vibes are really back there. Everything is fluorescent light bulb. It's very obvious that they knew exactly who it was. He kept saying, "Oh, well, since you mentioned that, what do you do as a job?" And I was like, "I'm a Twitch streamer." And he's like, "Well, since you mentioned that you were a Twitch streamer, what kind of things do you stream about?" And at first I was like, do I just tell him I play video games? Because I don't think he's going to believe me if I say I just play video games to him, right? So I was just like, yeah, I play video games, but I also do current events sometimes, drama, internet. And he's like, "Oh, do you talk about, since you mentioned that, you talk about the things that you talk about, do you talk about the news?" And I was like, "Yeah, I talk about the news." And he kept saying, "Okay, so when you talk about the news, do you talk about the war?" And I was like, "What do you mean by that?" He's like, "Do you talk about Trump?" And that was the first time where I was like, what the is this question? Like, I literally straight up told him, I was like, "Why are you asking me this?" Like, I was like, what does this have to do with anything? I saw no reason to hold back on certain things. So I said, "I don't like Trump." I was like, "What are you going to do? It's protected by the First Amendment. I don't like Trump." Yes. Right? Like, I was like, "I'm not fond of him. I don't like him. He said he was going to end the wars. He hasn't ended the wars. What's up with that?" As a black chatter, you talking to cops was killing me, bro. Dude. Oh my God. Okay. Chatters. As I mentioned yesterday, and I guess I will have to repeat it over and over again, you shouldn't do this. The reason why I did this is because I have a shit ton of privilege. Okay? I wanted to investigate what this inquiry was going to look like. I am wealthy enough to be sheltered from additional scrutiny. I am a public figure. If this were to happen to you in a situation like this, as it's happened to many Americans so far that have come into the country, there wouldn't be 7,000 international articles written about it. The reason why I took advantage of the privilege that I have, being a public person, and also on top of that, having enough money to potentially overcome any sort of serious scrutiny from the government, and access to groups like the ACLU and numerous other First Amendment defending like civil rights organizations with lawyers used this as an opportunity to try to figure out exactly what was going on with this inquiry process. Okay. And I stressed this over and over again yesterday, which is to not let you do this. I told you, you shouldn't do this. I have immense privilege, which is why I had the opportunity in my mind. I made this calculation to actually entertain this back and forth to see what was going on in their line of inquiry instead of immediately trying to lawyer up in this otherwise the secondary hold or detention that they engaged in. You have no idea how what you said could be used against you later. It's not about your example, but they're making you into an example. They're clearly looking for a reason to somehow charge you with material support for terrorism. I know, but you do realize that the things that I said in that room are, one, still protected speech, and two, there's nothing I can do if the fucking federal government wants to make an example out of me, you dumb fuck. What is wrong with you? I know. That's kind of the main point of contention here, don't you think? What the fuck are you saying? Yes, I know that already. You think I don't know that? You think I haven't talked to literal fucking journalists and also organizations so far since this conversation took place? I like that. I like that chatters in here are like, dude, you shouldn't have done that. It's like, even if I did, and they use what I said in that interview against me, that's still a precedent-setting court case. You understand? I'm taking that risk knowing full well what the risks associated with it are. And I'm also telling you not to do that. But I also will not be intimidated. Like that was my point. I like that because of the parasocial nature of Twitch streaming, you could have a fucking fascist government unironically apprehend and detain political dissidents, and chatters in the chat will still be like, well, you know, you should have conducted yourself better. Like, shut up. I know what I'm doing. I knew that I was taking a calculated risk to talk in that situation. This was partially the reason why. I made this calculated decision, because I wanted to see what their inquiries were going to look like. I had heard from TikTok stories of American citizens getting apprehended at the border, getting detained at the border. Okay? And I had a different red line than some other people do. My red line was unlawful search and seizure. But up until that point, I was going to entertain the inquiry so that I could engage in some sort of fact-finding mission. And I actually got TikTok as your source of news. No, you fucking moron. I'm the source of news in this situation. That's what I'm saying. I had heard firsthand accounts from people, not just on TikTok, but immigration attorneys being apprehended at the border, for example, on NBC and numerous other news outlets that had verified reports. So when this situation came, when I was in the similar situation, I was the one who was like, okay, I'm going to see what this is about. And yes, I will continue to travel internationally, and I will continue to talk about these things, and I'll continue to report on things that happen to me as well. As I've said over and over again, I am not a journalist. I'm a political commentator. I'm not an activist. I'm a political commentator. I'm an entertainer. But there are unique moments in my career where I do engage in some journalism, where I make some news, right? There is there's a lot of commentary, a lot of back and forth happening on this stuff, and there's been a lot of news coverage on it as well. And virtually every single outlet has reached out at this point to get to get my insight into what took place. With the limited amount of spare time that I have, I tried to use that to the best of my ability and respond to questions and things like that. But overall, there was, of course, a lot of support from liberals who were terrified of the things that are unfolding. A lot of articles were written about it virtually every single major news article, major news publication wrote about it. Here's the New York Times. On hasandpiker, popular left-wing streamer, says he was detained at airport. Mr. Piker said he was questioned for 2 hours on topics including the war in Gaza and President Trump. Popular Turkish-American online streamer said he was stopped and questioned for hours about his political beliefs by U.S. Customs and Border Protection after flying back in the United States from overseas on Sunday. Mr. Piker, 33, said in a live broadcast on Monday that he was asked about his job, his beliefs on Gaza and the President Trump, and other topics he discussed on his live stream while being held for 2 hours at an airport in Chicago. Mr. Piker, who was born in the United States, said he was passing through global entry and a U.S. Customs and Border Protection program that eases security checks for travelers deemed to be low risk when an agent asked him to step aside. According to Piker, a U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement agent led him to an area he described as a detention center where he was taken into a room for questioning. It's very obvious they knew who I was, Mr. Piker said, using an expletive. He has about 4.5 million followers combined on YouTube, Twitch, Trisha McLaughlin, a spokesman for the Department of Homeland Security, said in a statement on social media that Mr. Piker's claims that his political beliefs triggered the inspection are baseless. Upon entering the country, this individual was referred for further inspection, a routine lawful process that occurs daily and can apply for any traveler, she said. Once his inspection was complete, he was promptly released. Now, I found this to be a very funny response, and the reason why I think it's really funny is because, and I tweeted about this already last night. I found this to be really interesting. One, because first and foremost, they admit to it happening, which is like they openly admit to it taking place, right? Saying that I'm lying for likes is very funny because they don't even deny that it took place. Okay? They simply deny that it was a political targeting. And I think it's important. I think it's important to take note of what the Department of Homeland Security is taking issue with here. What the Department of Homeland Security is taking issue with here is political beliefs being triggered for the inspection. Now, I think that's important to take note of because it shows you what the admin is worried about, okay? Because if they were not worried about anything, they would have just been like, yeah, he's a fucking, he is a figure of notoriety that we pulled a red flag on. Because they openly admit that the detention happened. They openly admit that the investigation took place, but they're worried about the backlash that they might receive given that this is perceived as a political targeting. To which I responded with, by the way, in the NBC article, what part of a lawful routine inspection requires the DHS to question me about my political views, my opinions on Donald Trump, or my stance on Israel and Palestine? The agent was cordial, but the experience, along with reports of other Americans facing similar questioning, seems intended to create a chilling effect on speech. As a taxpayer, I believe CBP agents should be focusing on actual threats, like preventing agricultural risks or combating trafficking, not interrogating people about their political beliefs. As I said, the DHS response is so funny because they're not even disputing that it happened. They're omitting the insane questions that were asked and instead claiming that I wasn't targeted for my political beliefs. Why'd y'all ask me about Trump, Israel, Houthis, Hamas, and my Twitch bans then? Either the DHS is lying about the political motivations for HasanAbi's detention, or asking citizens about their allegiance to Israel is now their standard practice. Exactly. Is this normal? Not even just like allegiance to Israel, but also opinions on Donald Trump, the president, or opinions on Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis. Like, that's crazy. That's not normal. That is the whole point of this. The reason why this is insane is because you are asking an American citizen who is literally a part of global entry, right? That has already been, that is a known traveler to the Department of Homeland Security, an American citizen that was born on U.S. soil, questions about whether or not they have an allegiance to Donald Trump, the current president. None of this will bar you entry into the country. Do you understand? And I don't even think that that was the purpose. I think that the purpose was to create a chilling effect. That's it. Mr. Piker described the conversation as really, really interesting and very cordial. He said the agent asked him what he did for work, the topics he talked about in his streams, and whether he discussed the news, including the war in Gaza and President Trump. They straight up tried to get something out of me that I think they could use basically to detain me permanently, Mr. Piker said, using an expletive again. There's no direct connection or direct involvement. He also described the agent who identified himself as Iraqi as very sympathetic, where, okay, they literally took very specific parts of this to make this seem like it was a pleasant experience overall, okay? And they just did not, they omitted parts of this conversation that I definitely maintained it was not was not a pleasant experience. When he asked the agent why he was being detained, Mr. Piker said the agent told him it was routine. He also said he was repeatedly asked about his opinions on whether he was involved with Hamas, the Houthis, an Iranian-backed militant group that controls northern Yemen, and Hezbollah. Throughout the questioning, Mr. Piker said he was transparent in his responses and repeated the same answers, including describing himself as a pacifist who wanted the wars to end. In his broadcast, Mr. Piker said he planned to submit an online inquiry about why he was stopped.